first religion we're going to look at is Hinduism. And I've got some facts on here. And like I said, if you have books, it'd be more detailed than this. But when we first started talking about religions, we mentioned about linear religions and circular religions based on time. Christianity is linear. Islamic, it's linear, has a beginning, has an end. So when they look at time and they worship their God had a beginning, has an end. Hinduism and a lot of the religions in the Far East are based on circular time. They never end. That's why they have the doctrine of reincarnation built into their beliefs, that they're in this reality, but the goal is to escape suffering, and the only way to do that is to get out of this reality. So they set up a religion that gives them steps to getting out of this reality into being absorbed into the one. So you actually become part of the one. You lose your identity. You don't go out of existence. I don't know how to explain this, but they tried to. You don't lose your existence, but your identity as a person now ceases to exist. You have no emotions. You have no feelings and things like that. So thereby you're protected from suffering. Because if you have no feelings or no emotions, things like that, you can't cry, you can't get upset. So whatever happens is irrelevant. But you're not in the wheel of life, okay? And that wheel, by the way, surfaces not only in mainstream religions like Hinduism, but as you'll see when we get into, and I'm going to try and bring some pictures, but does that look familiar? All right, who used that? The Nazis. It's the wheel of life. If you look at the Hindu wheel, it's backwards. It's like this. And it's different than the, it's in the formation, this moving like this, like a wheel. The Nazis reverse it. They're occults. And so these symbols talk about the direction of time. And Hitler's group was a mixture of, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, it was a mixture of Catholicism, because he was raised Catholic, and the occult, which involved German stuff, Hindu, and everything else. That's why they were so twisted and did all the things they did to people. They had no respect for human life. And they saw themselves, at the top. But that was their symbol, and it was in their flag. But it goes back to the people who were driving the Nazis. If you like reading, there's a book by Joseph Carr called The Twisted Cross, one of the best books I ever read on Nazi Germany. And he talks about how behind the politics of Germany was these cats. Hitler didn't know all this stuff, but the people he had around him who saw themselves as gods, so to speak, and they created their own twisted religion mixed in with Christianity. Remember I talked about syncretism? It was a syncretized religion, the occult with Christianity. It's pretty bad. And but Joseph Carr wrote the book, The Twisted Cross. It's a good, and that's what that's kind of he's referring to. This is the way, by the way, in some people's minds, a cross, but it's in a different shape. And anyway, it shows up in Hindus, and it shows up in some of the other religions, but also in Nazism. All right. First of all, the origin of Hinduism is primarily in India. They have a little over 1 billion people now, but that's where it started. It is non-theistic. I've already mentioned it does not have a central God like we do. And truly, we know there's only one God. They don't believe in one God. They believe in multiple deities. Unites the worship of many gods with a belief in a single divine reality. And you see, there's a difference between reality and an actual being. And that reality is sometimes referred to as the one. So they have different beliefs. It's like a family of beliefs. The earliest stages, and notice I put up there 2000 BCE, before the Common Era. That's the new terminology. Before it would have been called before Christ, but that's the terminology they use. The civilization where the religion popped up was very advanced. So, as far as cultures go, their education, their intelligence, their societies, their cities, All of that was more civilized in other parts of the world. They even had languages. And, the languages varied from section to section, but they had languages. And that's important because it's been said through archaeology that the oldest discovery of written languages showed up about 6,000 BC over there in the area which is around Babylon. And so before then, if you remember, at the Tower of Babel, God divided the people through the use of changing how they spoke to each other. And they went in, and that's really the biblical explanation of how we got different peoples is from that. In other words, God created a man and a woman, but through process of time of interbreeding and, of course, having children and children having children, started with one couple, according to the Bible. And in the earliest stages, the mutation of the cells and the intermarriages, and for us, that's really twisted, but back then it wouldn't hurt the gene pool. People who studied that kind of thing said it would take generations and years before the gene pool would be damaged. And so the idea that you saw kinfolks marrying kinfolks in the early stages was accepted. We even see it following into Genesis with, nephews and nieces and cousins and sometimes brothers and sisters. For us, we shake our heads and say, well, I said, we'll go to West Tennessee and East Tennessee, and there may still some of that be going on. North Georgia and some places. But in the church where I pastored, we had a couple. They're older, but they were double first cousins. Her spouse had died. He had never been married. And they decided to get married. Well, it upset the church. And I had people show up at the house raising Cain because I was going to marry him. I said, I'm not marrying them. I told them I wasn't marrying them. Well, they said you were. I said, I'm not. If they want to get married, they can, but they're double first cousins. And people say, it's just terrible that I said, they're 70 years old, for heaven's sakes. Whatever. But anyway, people have done that through the years. But in civilizations like this, you didn't have as much as that. All right. Now, I know this is small for you to read. And by the way, Babs, I tried again to get copies. She's been, and Charlene, that with Comcast has had her systems down. She promised me this week. She called me late Thursday. She stayed here late. I promise you, Pastor, I'll get those copies to you. Tell them to be patient. Well, now that we're not going to meet next week, she's got another week 2 weeks to work on it. So.
Once we swapped the Comcast, the copy machine
right.
They had to come in and reset all of the settings.
Yeah. So it's not her falling down on the job. She just had some circumstances. So yeah.
That's right.
We can't enlarge that a little bit, can we? Or that's it, right? All right. The religion in the Vedic period, and you don't have to know what that means, but it's really before the 2000 period. So the people that came into India actually brought some of their religious beliefs with them, and they settled in India. The ancient scriptures are called Vedas, and that's what they're, we call ours the Bible, but their scriptures, the few teachings they have, the oldest ones are called Vedas. Sanskrit is the ancient language of India, and I don't reproduce any of that for you on the board, so you can imagine what it looks like. Two theories. One is that the invasion of India by the Aryans from South Russia came into the India area. So these Aryans, now I know you've heard that in Nazi Germany they referred to the Aryan race. Have y'all heard those terms before? They were an all-white race of people that were dominant in South Russia, more barbaric. But as time went along, they became more organized. Now, when people migrated back then to other areas, like to India from Russia, it usually meant the climate had changed. Droughts had come in. Other warring parties had invaded their properties. And they're constantly moving their families looking for better land. I mean, that was the case in the Bible when the Babylonians came into Israel. They had become very powerful. They migrated over there wanting to gain. They heard they had gold and all this other stuff. The Egyptians would go across once again into Israel. But the Babylonians and Babylonians and Egyptians never really were in conflict. The Assyrians were conquered by the Babylonians. The Assyrians before that conquered the northern part of Israel. So these movements of large masses of people were pretty common, centuries ago. We got it going on today with Ukraine. I mean, you got the Russians wanting to take the territory, and we're hearing all kinds of things. What the reason is, we'll probably never know. Laundering. I've heard laundering money from the Democrats, and that they're giving them money because. But it just don't make sense. I don't think we'll ever know. One thing for sure, Russia's taking land to get down to where the Black Sea is. And if you know anything about climate, that's the only warm water seaport Russia has. Everything else freezes up in the winter. So if they're going to become more dominant in the world and get a bigger Navy, they need the Black Sea. They have Navy presence there now, but they want a larger presence so they can, launch their ships and things like that. And that's a known fact. There's submarines and things like that. So, and they need that corridor on the east side to get there. That's what I've heard. But nonetheless, land grabs, World War I, World War II, are common. They were very common back then. Another explanation is multiple invasions brought the religion in. Male gods were mostly worshipped. They controlled nature. So originally, the religion of Hindu, the people had, like you said, lots of gods. It's into the millions now. It's almost like if you're in a little local area, you have your gods. But those gods are not all controlling over you, because your goal is to get out of the wheel of life, get out of this religious spectrum, get out of suffering, and get into this new reality called the One. But yet, while you're here existing, there are temples and gods are worshipped. And originally they were male and not female. On the other side here is some of the gods that are mentioned. And I don't know if I can pronounce it. They're like Hebrew to me. Some of y'all can't pronounce, but here's some of the gods. The first one is Darius. I think it's Piter. It means shining father. It's equivalent to the Roman god Jupiter, if you know anything about the Roman mythology. Indra, the god of storms and war. So they had a god for that. Agni, the god of fire. We get our English word ignite from some of the root words of that. Ushas, the god of dawn and renewal. And then you got Rudra, the god of winds. Varuna, the god of sky and justice. And this one here is the one that more people know about. Vishnu, which is the god of cosmic order. Surya, the god of the sun. And then you got Soma, god of altered states of mind. And Yama, the god of the afterlife. And that's just a few. I just mentioned some of the main ones that they have. So they had a god for almost every experience in everyday life. Storms, suffering, fire, the sun. And, I mean, the God that we serve, I still haven't fathomed how awesome he is. I can't imagine having all this to try to learn, and to be a part of. Did it go off, David? He's not back there. That's what I just did, but I'll try it again. It's good now we're not flying an airplane. This is brand new. Do what? Back here, right? I pointed it back there. Yes, it's flashing.
Has it been paired? Bluetooth?
You know about that.
They pointed you.
It
It ain't fair to me.
I don't know.
He's gone.
Okay. All right. What do you know about Hindu while we're waiting? What have you heard about Hindu? What's your impression of Hindu? Seriously, have you ever thought about it? You ever thought much about it?
The only religion.
Do what?
The only religion.
What, Hindu?
They say to do.
If you talk with some Hindus, you must stay at Motel 6, 7-Eleven, and that's what he said.
He had a shrine in his future and everything.
Oh, really?
The only thing I can think of is a joke. Don't they have a red dot right here?
Now he
No. Females
That's got the red dot.
have that.
Yeah, I said, somebody told me a red dot's a electric start and a wrap around the head's an electric start.
Red dot's a scratch off.
It's a scratch off.
You get a liquor store or a gas station.
Come on up here and tell us the rest of the story, Tim. I like your version better than I like mine.
You pick up a lot in construction, don't you, Dan?
Yeah.
They probably make up a lot of religions in them camps at construction, don't they?
He's got it.
All right.
There we go.
Is it? Don't worry about it? Okay. Well, did he? Did he bring back some pictures? Would he like to bring them, and so we can, not tonight, but I mean in the future? Yeah, see if y'all can get some of them. We'll show them.
Besides the food, all the food tastes like one thing.
Chicken.
Curry chicken.
Everything's got curry, whether it's eggs, chicken. They don't eat beef.
No.
Cows roaming the streets.
You could be sitting there eating and the cow just come up and,
He said it's against the law to try to convert anybody from Hindu.
That's right.
Right? And they actually have a special police
That's right.
that is,
Man's mad.
I got it. Yeah. Special police.
and he said their luggage and all was searched for any kind of literature they were bringing in and all that. So he said they were at a seminary teaching young pastors. Literally, they sat in a circle and fired questions. Him and the friend that he went with answered questions.
Because they don't have any.
That's how they're doing it in the seminary,
Right.
bringing people in. And he said on the last day, they were doing something, and their host told them to be quiet. That was the religion police. Just don't look at them, you know. And he said they never were bothered by them, but they knew they were there.
Yeah. They will, you can get in serious trouble if you try to, do street preaching or anything like that.
But get this, best customer service in the world. Friendly customer, he said everywhere they went, everybody was friendly. If you wanted customer service, nobody complained, it's yes, sir, and he said, that was,
There have been several movies in the last decade that have been produced by people from India about their culture and their practices. And I took one of them and showed part of it in one of my classes. And they've got some bizarre things. India's trying to progress away from some of their backward practices, but it's almost impossible from the government down to the lowest of the caste system. It's all, you're born into it, Worship took place primarily outdoors, although they do have temples through time. Priests were incorporated, which meant they found consistency like us pastors if we went to seminary and under Southern Baptist training, or our theology would be, should be on the same page, though there are some who get off that. So the priests are incorporated. Offerings of milk, clarified butter, grains, animals, sacred chants were used instead of, the Indian music, the instruments they use and things like that is just like a lot of Eastern music. It doesn't really follow the beats or the type of music we have, but they do incorporate music. Many Vedic gods are no longer worshipped, but the use of fire and chants are still used in a lot of their worship practices that they have. The Vedas, which remember are the scriptures, were first orally transmitted, then later on they were written down. By the way, the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, started out as what they call an oral translation, which means it wasn't written down. They memorized it, and then it was passed down from generation to generation. By the time we get somewhere, I don't know, maybe 900 or so, BCE or BC, David's kingdom and stuff, we start seeing in the Bible that the law is written. and I can't remember the exact date, but you actually see them talking about that. When you get down to the period of around 600, when they carried into captivity and they come back, which would put you around 500 or 400 late BC, the book of Ezra and Nehemiah talk about the book of the law. So we know it was a book, because Ezra has a service and they bring the book of the law out. So somewhere in that time period, they started writing it down. Prior to that, but you got to remember, if the Old Testament is primarily historical books, then you write your history as you go. So they didn't have all 39 books in the beginning. They had the law, which is 5 books. And then after they got into the promised land, you start the book of Joshua, Judges, and so forth. Then you're getting bigger and bigger. But the book of the law was memorized, and then the history was, started being recorded. But for them, same tradition. First it was oral, then it became written. The name means knowledge or sacred lore. That's what Veda means. About 1500 BCE, revealed to the holy man called Rishis. 4 basic texts within the Vedas. You have the Rig Veda, which are hymn chants. We sang hymns. These are part of their belief. You have Yajur, ceremonial knowledge. These would be the writings that tell you how to practice your Hindu faith. And you would study those. And the priest would, of course, teach those. You had Atharva, knowledge from the teacher. And this might be that a local priest or guru would obtain knowledge himself and include his teachings in with the other. Then you had the Samaveda, which are music chants. Do y'all know what chants are, right? They're kind of broken syllables. Not sentences, but broken syllables, and you might have several verses of them. They used them in the Catholic Church. I don't know if they still do. But I'm just saying chanting and repeating things and chanting things was a practice of many different religions. Is there a delay on it, David, or something? Or
He doesn't know why it's true.
he doesn't either?
It could be the new internet.
Well, this was before Comcast. Right there in the middle. Come on, Mark. There's only one button on the whole thing other than to turn on and off. All right. Yeah, it's working. Another of the books is the, what do you call that, Upanishads? 7 later works in addition to the Vedas. So these are, as the religion progressed, they added to it. Islam was good about that. Now, when you have a religion like this, it's called an open religion. It's not closed. Christianity is closed because God's word says you can't add anything to it, take anything away from it. But in this religion, it's constantly expanding. Mormonism claims to be closed. However, as they progressed through time in America, and America progressed, America became less and less racially separated, because when the Mormons started out, they had in their book that if you were black, you were cursed, and you couldn't make it into heaven or to their new planet. And as time went along and they got into modern times, it became a big issue for them. Well, I still haven't had any African-American Mormon guys show up on my front porch, so they're still, 2 little white guys. But my point is, they have changed their writings to try to reflect, but in the deeper parts of the Mormon church, they haven't changed. They still keep it. They're doing that to get people in, because they're not going to let everybody get into the inner circle. They just want their numbers to grow to get the money to grow for that elite group that gets to the inner circle, and it's a special club. It says here, these books express the philosophical and religious ideas that arose through time. 500 BCE, major changes took place. It's called the Axis Age. Have you ever heard of the Axis powers? Some of the similar words are found there. The Axis Age. Techniques for altering consciousness entered in, such as sitting for meditation, breathing deeply, fasting, sexual abstention, silence, insomnia, psychedelic plants, and darkness. Sounds like everybody wants to be a part of that. So next,
Common sorority.
yeah, that's probably, the Beatles were involved in some of this stuff and in their music and stuff. We'll get into that a little bit later. The origin of these books, they were 100 written works. It means sitting near. They have a dialogue form with the guru and the priest or whoever is teaching would, talk with the students and go back and forth, a dual thing. They also reach extreme positions of being a forest dweller. Now, a forest dweller would be someone that as they get older, now I want to say it's somewhere in the 40s, I can't remember exactly, but you reach into the 40s, and I'd like to talk to Brian, see if he ran into any of them, because they do come out in public. A forest dweller, extremism, they leave their family, because they're at the last phase of getting ready to try to leave this world and get into the wheel, and so out of the circle. Somewhere around 40, 45, it's early. Middle age. Yeah. But listen to what you have to do. The extremist, the reason they call them forest dwellers, you have to leave your family and civilization, go out in the woods and survive in the forest. You have to go without clothes. You have to basically become, I guess what's that? Naked and what, afraid? Yeah, you become naked and afraid. Probably, I haven't researched the producers of that show. Do what?
Because I knew the answer. I beat him.
Oh, you beat him.
Naked and afraid is getting out of the shower and looking in the mirror.
Well, that's true. Or going out in the woods and finding somebody else that's naked there too, and then you're afraid of each other. But anyway, especially if you're in the 50s and 40s and on up. I want to say it's in the 40s. I'll check that out. These are extremists. Now, a moderation of that is the husband may leave the family and go off on a trip into the wooded area and not go naked and not do that, but lose a lot of the conference and be gone for a while. Then he comes back. He doesn't forsake his family.
Actually, he's leaving while the kids are teenagers.
This is probably true. That's why he doesn't have any clothes or anything else. Let's see. Dialogue form forest dwellers, prose and poetic form, as far as the books go, concepts, Brahman. This word Brahman is a big word in Indian Hindu. Brahman is to be great, divine reality at the heart of things. So they look at the force as being the central control of everything and is at the heart of everything. And the term they use is Brahman to describe that reality, okay? Experiencing that reality. Sat, it means reality. Chit means consciousness. And Ananda means bliss. Those words describe what you're trying to do, learning the Hindu practices, is to reach a state of bliss, try to incorporate yourself through meditation and experiencing the reality, experiencing Brahma, because ultimately you're going to become a part of that. And to me, and I'm just being practical, unless you're born in this, it's a very complicated religion. Now, Tim's friends apparently are, maybe you can get your friend to come to church, see if he'll tell us anything. Atman is the self or your soul. So you refer to yourself or your soul as Atman. I looked at it and said Atman, so instead of saying Batman, what'd you say? No, I'm Atman, I'm not Batman. It's the deepest self. Jiva is the individual soul, but Atman is a deeper awareness of that soul. Does that make sense? Okay. Atman is godlike. So that inner person inside of you, you're a god. The inner soul is actually godlike. Okay? Brahman refers to the experience of the sacred, divine, holy timelessness. Timeless. There's no end to it. So it talks about the eternal will of life. And so this reality of experiencing the godness is an eternal experience. The names are interchangeable, so they could really say one, you say the other one. Okay? Concepts continue. Maya is illusion or mystery. Now, you ladies who buy things in the grocery store, have you ever seen something with Maya on it? What is it? Oh, yes, you have. You ever seen that lady with Maya beside on rice? Didn't think about it, did you? Huh? Well, it's imported out of India. Huh? Yeah, it's illusion or mystery. It's both matter and spirit. So they're dividing, if this represents our flesh, and our flesh contains our soul or spirit, then when we talk about getting saved, our soul is saved. And when we put our faith in Jesus Christ, it affects what our flesh does. Do y'all agree with that? Okay. And that's what 1 John was all about, because they were Christians who said, even way back then, they said, it's possible to have a deep relationship with God spiritually, but the flesh just does things that you can't control, so you're not responsible. And John hit him right in between the eyes. No. We're both flesh and soul. Now, the flesh, because it's sinful, can't get into heaven. So it has to be shed away, and the soul contains a new body that can contain a saved soul that gets to go to heaven. And Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians. Now, when you look at these other religions, they think along the same lines. So they've got a word that describes that. It says here, did I jump ahead? I must have had, yeah. Now it's working all the time. Both matter and spirit. So they would refer to flesh and soul being together and, of course, separated. So when you go out in here into the big wheel, their experience is, the soul travels out here, but it inherits a new matter. And that new matter may come back as a bug or a rat or, some other living creature. And if you've done all that you should do and practice good karma, you get to go into the one, the Brahman. You get absorbed. And you're no longer running back and forth in reincarnation trying to get there. You've actually obtained it, I want to know, and I've talked to your Hebrew friend. All right, so I go out of the wheel and I come back as a bug. How's a bug going to do Hindu when a bug can't read and write? So you're stuck as a bug to somebody. And hopefully in that religion, nobody will step on you, because they practice that big word ahizma, which means don't kill anything. So I guess you'd have to die until the bug cycle runs out. Anyway, the individual is part of a greater whole. That individuality is absorbed into the consciousness of the universe. So rebirth or reincarnation, the ultimate destination is realized. So here you are, flesh and soul, but you're really a part of this whole. You're just outside of that reality right now, and your goal is to get off this wheel of time and go back into here. In so doing, you lose consciousness, you lose emotions, you lose anger, you lose all the emotions and things like. You lose fear, suffering goes away. Because the goal of Hinduism is the same as Buddhism, to remove suffering. So your religious experience is to escape this reality and get into a better reality. All right, let me stop. Is there some religion you think you'd like to try? Tim, you didn't try to get involved, did you? All right, karma. How many times you've heard the word karma? Did anybody ever use it? I've heard it on the golf course a lot of times. People hit a good shot. Somebody says, you must have good karma. I said, no, I just hit a good shot. And why do we mix some of these words in there? Because they're in our movies. They're in our books. They're everywhere. And once we learn a little bit about the word, we, put it in our language. May the force be with you, The force that determines which direction you travel during rebirth is called karma. So whatever karma is described as and how to practice good karma, that determines where you go on this wheel, what you come back as and what you return as, and if you finally get absorbed. It's based on the accumulation of karma. So that's a what? Works religion. The moral law of cause and effect. What goes around comes around. So good karma brings higher rebirth. Bad karma brings lower rebirth. So if you're practicing good karma, you get to come back in reincarnation as a higher order of life form here. Might come back as a cow. And if you come back as a cow, what is that?
Several copies.
How'd you do that?
Yeah, working on it right now. So
Mr. Ken, you're not doing anything but sleeping. How about come up here and and
not
remove.
sleeping. You know, I was just thinking, you're talking about that they want to get to that center circle so there's no more pain and fear. We're trying to get there too, but we're not using a circle, we're using a cross. They
Yeah.
use a circle to get to that center. We got a cross to get
The way of the cross leads us to Jesus. We got the person who's God.
So their ultimate goal is the same as our ultimate goal, but our ultimate goal has already been paid for.
Well, yes and no. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through him. Now keep in mind, Hindu was here before Judaism. Hindu was here before Christianity. Okay? As far as religions, they were already here. All right. That being said, the people in Israel and places like that were not exposed to Hinduism. And there's a reason for it. In India over here, and you got Afghanistan here and Pakistan's in here. When you come this way to Babylon, and then you come all the way over here to Israel, and I'm just making you a rough map. One thing that happened, these people in here in Afghanistan today called and Pakistan, these people were fierce fighters. Nobody like the Greeks or the Babylonians and even the Romans, when the Romans tried to go through. See, the goal for the Roman Empire was to conquer the entire world. They ran headlong, and this was the pathway. There's a route through the trade routes. India would trade stuff out. China would trade stuff out, and they would bring small portions back. And as this material came, they realized, hey, these people are wealthy over here. They've got some silks and things we want. They've got things that we need and things we want to conquer. But the problem was, to get over there, you had to come down through here and back up through here. You had the Himalayas here that blocked going into China. But you could come around and go back up through here, and maybe there was a route through the mountains. But the big story is, India was valuable enough with the silks and things like that China had, and they had some stuff. They were valuable enough. But these people were such fierce fighters that the Greeks nor Romans could ever conquer them. And so that shut down the trade routes. And so trade routes trickled back across, and it wasn't much. The Catholic Church tried to open them up. And then you had Islam, and Islam became a blocking power and force. It was not until Renaissance days in Europe when the trade routes were finally opened up and trade between China and India opened up. So India grew stronger, more powerful in resistance, and of course, because they're isolated from these other empires, they kept their religion intact.
But even before Christianity or Judaism, in man was a desire to go somewhere after he died, to be in a better place.
Yeah, all these religions are looking for something better. This world is suffering. Almost every religion has at its root a pathway to get out of suffering. Christianity does that. We don't think about it, but think about, who do you pray to when you're in trouble? God. How do you get through trouble? Faith. When you're going through trouble, does that mean that God doesn't love you? No. Does it mean God can use suffering to help you to get stronger or closer to him? Yes. So Christianity and Judaism answers those questions. These don't. These put the burden back on you to get out of here and to use their pathways to get out of here. And through process of time, people put all these teachings together. I think I jumped ahead. No, the good karma brings higher birth. Samsara refers to the wheel of life or the circle of constant rebirth. That's what I showed you a while ago. That's called samsara. Okay? And in Western thought, we believe you only live once. In Hindu, the belief is you may have many lives before you actually get into Brahma or out of this existence. What was that James Bond movie was? You only live once. Wasn't there a James Bond movie or something like that? Samsara is that wheel. Moksha, freedom or liberation to be released. We talk about heaven. Their goal is to reach moksha, which is that eternal release from this life. It is the ultimate human goal. As one becomes liberated, one looks at life less from a selfish and egotistic point of view and seeks to embrace the whole. The results in becoming kinder and gentler. So you try to lose your anger. You try to lose your selfish ambitions, possessions, even personal relationships. Anything that would cause you to be attached to this world, you work on getting rid of. That's why when you go through phases and you finally reach the forest dweller, that's when you finally say, I've reached it, I'm getting out of here. And essentially, in the old, and they probably still practice it, I saw films, they're older films, probably from the 70s and 80s, and that's why I wanted to see what his films, I could recognize if I saw his films. He might have filmed some, didn't know who they were. But we saw some films, and the forest dwellers had come to town because there was some kind of festival down by the river. And anyway, they didn't show the full person, but they were walking naked through the streets. They were old, they were beards and white hair and wrinkled and skinny as a rail. And they were walking among the people, and the people just, oh, that's just something awesome. You're almost there. And I'm saying, yeah, they're naked and hungry and starving and left their families, and they have no responsibility. And then people would give them things. If you gave them things, you could do that. And for you, that's an act of worship, to give something to a forest dweller. And it's funny because all these people are out there, and then some of them would sit around in, of course, in the yoga position and be teaching. And but anyway, people really thought a lot of the forest dwellers. To me, I wouldn't even want to think about that, but nonetheless, you become a kinder, gentler person. Living spiritually in the everyday world, the Bhagavad is a song of the Divine One. It is a poem, and its original meaning, it taught violence. Isn't that interesting? Music teaching violence, sound like Islam. Mohandas Gandhi saw it as an allegory and said it was really meant to fight against ignorance, selfishness, and anger. He was what we call a pacifist. He's probably one of the most well-known, pacifists or world leaders from India. He is kind of almost single-handedly giving credit for getting the British out of India, as a direct colony and control or Commonwealth group or whatever they call them. And, finally the British left, but he used pacifist means for doing that. In other words, instead of a revolution with guns and fighting, he used sit-ins and everything else, whatever they did, peaceful ways of trying to get, solutions. Mother Teresa would be considered a pacifist and world peacemaker among the Catholics. And some of her practices and things follow pretty close to this. It's been said that some of the teachings of him are very similar to the teachings of Jesus and his actions toward his fellow man. Jesus said, what? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Was something that said the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. You'll see some of these things pop up in some of these religions. But he was a pacifist. The caste system, now this is the most bizarre situation, and it's practiced in America today. How many Patels have y'all seen run into that are Hindus? Huh?
I use the name Patel because it simplifies the name, I think.
No, Patel's their name, but it's a caste system, one of the caste systems. And they're permitted to, they're permitted to commercialize and things like that. But if you're born into a lower caste, you have to be a servant. You have to clean bathrooms, toilets. You have to take out the trash. You can never move out of that.
Bracelets around part of their arm, depending on how it goes, is how high they are
in the caste system. No. But what they did through time is a division of society into social classes that are created by birth or occupation. So what caste you were born into, you are to remain. You can't marry out of it. You're stuck. There are many subcastes within the caste. You're forbidden to intermarry. A good life now may result in a higher caste in the next rebirth. So now you can kind of see what the wheel's all about. That if you're down here in the lower caste, it might be that if you practice good karma, and you get out here on the samsara, that you come back in the next life one step higher than you were the last time. That'd be a booger-boo, wouldn't it? You ask your mom, can I go to school? Well, yeah, but you can't learn anything more than just how to wash the toilet, clean the toilet. Yeah, he's in a higher, talk to him.
If his daddy is my boss's citizen, has more money than California.
Which means he's in a caste system that permits that. And let's see. I think they're mentioning it. There's 5 major social castes, and we'll do this and we'll stop. The first one is priest or Brahmin. This does Vedic rituals. So if you're a priest, that's the top order. You're the one doing the teaching and doing the religion. The warrior is next. He's noble. You can see the name for it. Protector, class, or he's an aristocrat, very wealthy. So if you're born into that class, you'll stay wealthy. Everything will be done to keep you there. All right. The next one is a merchant, which is Vashaya. These are landowners, money lenders, and artisans, skilled people. The next one is peasant or Shudra. These are your servants. And that might be anything from house cleaning to working in someone's home, yard work, whatever it is. A lot of them fall into that category. The untouchables. These are the ones who do the dirtiest work. Dalit is the name of them. These are the people that are the, harbingers of trash and garbage, or, they do the menial task. Pay is low, work is hard. This would be a typical American today after we get all the immigrants in for us. Cleaning toilet, sweeping streets, collecting dead animals. They're often discriminated against. People won't have anything to do with them. They're isolated, so they live in parts of the slum areas. Housing is very poor. Shanties. That's why I want to see some of his pictures too. See if he went. Did he go through any of those areas? Yeah. The people that went from our church, there was 2 ladies, South Korean. I can't think of the other lady. They went there twice. Second time she came back, she said, "I'm not going back." She said the evil.
The Indian guy that's some millionaire came from the slums of India.
Yeah.
There's a movie.
Yeah. There's several movies out about the Indian culture. Because my goodness, every time you need help on the phone, you're talking to somebody in India. That servant class of people are using outsourcing, and that's who you're talking to.
The king's palace. And he's got a picture, and this thing is a solid mile long.
Yeah.
This wall, and the summer palace is at the end, the winter palace is the other end. So the engineering is amazing. The way they use water to cool the summer palace, and the colors. Said they were told that none of the colors have been freshened up since they were put in place more than 500 years ago.
They still looked.
And he said it's just brilliant how bright the colors are.
Sherman Williams wouldn't be in business. I didn't either. Gandhi tried to reform the way they were treated by the upper classes. So if you passed, a untouchable on the street, you wouldn't help them or try to take care of them or anything.
Yeah, they only had, they were out where there was only a certain amount of interaction, that they could do.
They were trying hard not to draw attention to themselves.
Oh yeah, the 2 women that she said at every home they went into, even the ones that were some Christians, they had their own little altars. And but out in the streets, she said we couldn't even carry any Christian symbols. And she said they would walk the streets, and we would stop in front of the shrines and places, and she said we would pray. Light would come into this dark world. And she said, well, you were not allowed to discuss Christ with anyone.
Do you think with 1 billion people practicing that religion that we would ever make an inroad into that country?
Well, it's like I said this morning, I didn't think Carolina beat Tennessee 63-38. So in this world,
Really,
it's a real
real challenge to convert.
with God,
million people that's been practicing this for 2,000 years.
there are Christians in India.
Yes.
They're small. There's some Islam in India, but they're small. They don't like Islam. There's a couple other factions that are there, but they have little mini wars in India all the time with religious wars, where they send their police in, like you were saying, and they'll send the military in and wipe out an area. They know there's a bunch of them there to kill them. Have no problems with it. That's why it's been protected. And if Christianity came in there, the caste system would die. And if the caste system died, the economics would die. Imagine America if slavery had stayed intact, what the labor force would look like. Slave labor versus paid labor. Well, if over there you got a caste system, they're destined because of they're born into this. They can't move up into another area, so they've got to serve you. That's their life. They've got to be the ones doing it. You don't have to have immigrants come in. They'll take care of it. And each level has a tier, and it's hooked into the economics, through religion. So they're forced into it. So you got an economic system that can keep the country running. But at the same time, it's being overpopulated, and their resources are not that great. If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, Texas and India are about the same size. But they've got 1 billion or something, 1.2 now maybe, and Texas doesn't have anywhere near that. But we'll look into it in a little more detail next week. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm really interested. I always like to see stuff like that. And not next week, in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go back through my files and see if I can find some of these videos and stuff, and I'll show you some things. But a lot of them were on VCR. They used what do they call it, VCR? And my VCR broke. And
The worst thing was they give you a sheet and a blanket. They don't make beds and mattresses.
that thick.
That thick, and it's like on the board. He said,
How did he get any dysentery or anything like that? No.
he said the only thing was the flights there. When you get on these airplanes and transfer, guess what they serve? Curry. He said the curry chicken and the curry.
What is the curry? Is that the spice you're talking about, or
Spice.
what's it taste like? I don't know if I've ever had it.
You can smell it on.
It's really good. I didn't get Dr.
It exudes from their
Yeah,
From their body.
that odor that you smell when you're around them, that's what that is.
Well, I hadn't smelled that on any of my doctors, so they must not be in
Even
me.
the coffee.
It doesn't work then.
He said he tried to be the first one up to make himself a
Pint.
cup of coffee, because even when you don't want to upset your host, but all the coffee's got all kinds of herbs and stuff in them. He managed. The only thing that bothered him was his diabetes because of allergies.
That's one reason I'd have a hard time traveling.
That was he's borderline, so that was a hard thing because of what they.
Somebody like me, I couldn't go. I've got so many issues that.
He learned all about on this flight back.
Who'd he go with? What group?
Mark Reiser's son-in-law, Bo, he's another minister. They went. This is the second time Bo's been. They both go to Luther Rice. They're in doctorate.
Yeah, the reason I was asking. I think he's dead now, but Dr. Long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Long.
Oh, Dr. Long was a mess. He preached a couple of revivals for me, and he stayed in my house, and he got